Coast FM's Celebrity Science, bringing you interviews with scientists, celebrities, and special guests. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, Ben Makin, for this week's episode of Celebrity Science here on Coast FM. We're going to be bringing you some special guests this evening, some very, very special guests indeed, all alongside some great tunes and, of course, a cheeky little bit of banter. Only a bit, though. Only a bit, if that's all right. Anyway, I've got a bunch of ways for you to get involved tonight, so listen close, because I know for a fact that you want to win some stuff. I've got some cool stuff to give away, actually. More on that in just a second. But who have we got on the show? We've got Chris Packham, naturalist and TV presenter. Fantastic. I managed to catch Chris, have a quick chat with him. He was actually talking about his love for dogs. I mean, who doesn't love dogs? That's fantastic. But also, he's been trying to balance this with his energy use at home. So he's given some tips on how we can all be a bit greener at home, but still pamper our pets, in his own words. Chris is coming on the show this evening. Delighted about that. We also have, now this is super, super cool. I've actually been playing with paper aeroplanes in the studio just because of this. Sophie Harker, she is the Young Woman Engineer of the Year award winner for the Institute of Engineering and Technology. She actually works on future concept aircraft. This is why, I was kind of testing my own future concept aircraft in the studio, you see. Yeah. Well, Sophie's going to be talking about how a meeting with an astronaut kicked off her love for science engineering. We're talking about her day job, how she looks at these future concept aircraft, the kind of tests she runs, and what it's all about. Sounds awesome, by the way, just going to warn you. We also touch on some recent films like First Man and things. Oh, it's great. It's a great interview. Sophie, thanks so much for coming on the show. Great to have you here. We also have, if science and engineering isn't your thing, then how dare you? No, only joking. We also have a sporting lady on the show this evening, Crista Cullen, MBE. She's an Olympic gold medal winning hockey player. Delighted to have Crista. She's talking about a trek she recently did up Mount Kilimanjaro. More on that a bit later this evening. We also have... Now, I've attempted this tonight, ladies and gents. Not sure how it's going to go. Not really a businessman, as you're probably well aware, but I've attempted to do a business interview for you this evening. This is with Sarah Willingham. Sarah is known for managing a bunch of actually really popular brands, Pizza Express being one of them, so a big name in the world of business, but perhaps more well known in the public sphere for her work on Dragon's Den, because, of course, she was one of the dragons. She's a lovely person, though, so I feel bad calling her a dragon. I do, of course, specifically refer to her work as a dragon on Dragon's Den there, not just being horribly rude. She's a lovely woman. Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. I should mention as well, of course, all of these special guests have some real cheeky song requests, so, don't worry about it. I've got you covered for music tonight, too. Maybe I'll sneak in some of my own personal choices, maybe not, because, I kind of like to hang on to my listeners, really. Don't want to scare you away. No, we'll see what happens. Now, we've also got of course, we've got a scientist star of the week for you today. Now, shall I reveal who that is today? Okay, well, you know what? I actually came up with a little riff, a little little jingle I can play when we're revealing who the scientist of the week is. I thought this was kind of cool. Now, I was torn. I was really torn because there's something I really want you to hear. Okay, there's a really cool interview. And I was just deciding whether it should be this one or... because there could be two scientists of the week this week. Maybe I'll have two. We could do that, couldn't we? Anyway, here's a little riff. I'll reveal this for you now. Pretty exciting, this riff, by the way. Be careful. This week's scientist star is revealed to be... Well, that's a bit silly, isn't it? A bit tacky. Let's stop that. Anyway, it is, of course, Professor Dave Hoskin, our favourite evolutionary biologist here at Celebrity Science. He, of course, is one of our show regulars, alongside Professor Sasha Dull. I put this question to Dave recently. I don't know if you've heard this interview before. It's all about ageing. I asked Dave, what is ageing biologically? Is there such a thing as anti-aging? Well, now I've got you interested, haven't I? Yep, Dave, we'll be talking all about that a bit later. Also, we put a silly question to him, so don't worry about that. Well, I tell you what, if we have time as well, because I'd love to play this interview again for you as well, don't know if you caught this, with Benjamin Mee. Benjamin is the CEO of Dartmoor Zoo, and actually he had a Hollywood film based around his life and around his work at the zoo. Hollywood film called We Bought a Zoo, starring Matt Damon and Scarlett Johansson. Don't know if you caught that film. Pretty cool film. Anyway, I chatted to Benjamin Mee himself recently. So not the Matt Damon equivalent, the far more handsome equivalent, the real version, the real Ben Mee. Chat to him about the real story behind that film. So if you're interested, listen in this evening. That will be coming on towards the end of the show today. I tell you what, that's enough of me chatting for now, isn't it? Shall we crack on? I think so. First interview coming up for you tonight, ladies and gents. It's Chris Packham.
It's Chris Packham here. What am I? I've got to describe myself. Well, I'm male, I'm 57. I'm not into astrology, so it's irrelevant that I'm a Taurian. But I'm a very passionate naturalist, and I have a great concern about looking after the environment. We are a nation of animal lovers, and when it comes to our pets, they're pampered. And I don't think this is a bad thing. We want to keep them happy, and we want to keep them healthy. However, from my perspective, it's finding a compromise between that and keeping the environment happy and healthy as well. So energy wastage and inefficiency is not something that I'm tolerant of, and I do my very best under difficult circumstances to try and make sure that, yes, my poodle is nice and warm, but at the same time I'm not pouring money down the drain and wasting energy which is difficult to generate, and we want to look after it and use it responsibly. So that's the key thing. And what we're on about today is satisfying both of these objectives, and there are means of doing that in the modern world, and one of them that excites me is new technology. I mean, we take on new technology in our lives all the time. We embrace it with gusto. We love using it. But in the home, there are opportunities to do this as well. And you can fit smart meters which tell you about your energy usage. And they will give you an indication of where your energy is going. And I think, I've got one of these things. And when you look at it, you think, a bit crazy to be having the washing machine, the TV, the dryer on at this particular time of day when energy is more important. And you can fit, these Tado smart thermostats to your radiators in your house, so you can control each one of them individually and remotely. So why heat the whole house for one dog when you can heat just one room for one dog? It will be comfortable, and I'm happy about the environment.
I wonder if we could if there are any kind of other things that people can be doing to be a bit more, of course, Chris, you were talking there about some, energy efficiency, and I just wonder really if there's anything obvious. I don't know, there might not be, but if there's anything obvious people can be doing there, basically.
Well, do you often wonder why, if you have a dog or a cat, it shifts from one place to another throughout the course of the evening in the room? I lay down on the floor, and I can sense that there are drafts in the room, or sometimes it gets too hot and they move to a cooler spot.
Yes.
So put yourself in your pet's position. Put yourself quite literally in its paws. Get down on the ground and feel what it's like to be there. And you may find that simply fitting a draft excluder is going to save you a lot of problems. We do think of some of our dogs in particular as being roughy-tufty animals. They go out, they run through the mud, they jump in the river when it's freezing cold. But they are equally susceptible to chills. So therefore, drying them off properly when you get them home, perhaps getting them a good raincoat. Both of my dogs have raincoats. I'm not ashamed of the fact that I try to keep them dry.
Yes, absolutely.
They're elderly animals, yes. And as a consequence of that, you wouldn't go out with your coat. Why do you expect your dog to do the same?
You know what? I'd absolutely love to. I'd love to give you a song request. I don't know if I can interest you at all, and I'm sorry that I've only mentioned this now. It is a bit mean, but I'd just love to get you something on. Basically, is there anything I can interest you in?
What about something high energy? Since we're talking about energy, something high energy. It's not one of my favourites, but it might go down well with your listeners. You could do "Jump" by Van Halen.
What a storming choice, Chris!
Mara Zion, Morva, Mousel.
West Cornwall's Coast FM, your local.
Welcome back, guys. It's me, Ben, still in the studio, I'm afraid. Sorry to disappoint you guys. Well, how about then that little interview with Chris there? Did you enjoy that? A bit more on pets, actually, because I did mention this little competition. This is awesome. This is all to celebrate the release of the film A Dog's Journey, out in cinemas now. PG, that film, by the way, just in case you need to know. And I've got a couple of branded things to give away to any dog owners out there. Now, very simple to win. I'm actually holding one of the items here. Oh, behold its majesty. Wow, it's cool. You can see this on my Facebook. Go on there. Ben the Radio Guy, find me, because I like to show off this, actually, to you. You can see what it is. Got some treat jars, for example. These are really cool. all branded. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Really cool. Some other stuff as well. All you have to do, text me or message me. If you've got me on Facebook, message me. Comment on the video, whatever you want to do, however you want to do it. Yeah, whatever. Just get hold of me somehow. You can text me on the coastline as well. That's 07441 900 600. That's 07441 900 600. All you have to do is let me know. I just want to hear some funny stories about your dog. That's all. I love funny stories about dogs. Might have been when he was particularly naughty, he or she was naughty. I don't know. Whatever you think's funny, you tell me the story, because the winning stories are going to win a bunch of stuff from this Dog's Journey goodie bag. Do it! All right, well, moving on with the show. I'm expecting to be inundated there. If I'm not, I'll be very, very, very disappointed, people. So get in touch, all right? Otherwise, I'll punish you by playing Rod Stewart non-stop, even though that's kind of a reward, isn't it? So maybe I shouldn't. Anyway, going to move on with the show now. I'm going to invite our next very special guest tonight. Moving on to a bit of engineering now. This is awesome. This is Sophie Harker. She's the Institute of Engineering and Technology's Young Woman Engineer of the Year award winner. She looks at future concept aircraft in her day job. She's also going to explain how a meeting with an astronaut kicked off her love for science and engineering. It's Dr. Sharman, more on her in a second. Sophie will explain all. We also talk about some recent movies that have kind of brought back our love for, brought back the public's love for all things space as well. Sophie's here, peeps. I'm going to invite her to the show very shortly. Straight after Sophie, we're going to move into a bit of sports and hear about a fantastic adventure that a fantastic person, Crista Cullen, MBE, has recently undertaken. She's an Olympic gold medal winning hockey player. She recently took on a pretty amazing challenge. I'll tell you about that very shortly. So don't go anywhere. After Sophie, we've got Crista and a bunch of special guests after that too. But for now, I'll leave you in the very capable hands of Sophie Harker. Sophie, welcome to the show. Well, thank you very much indeed for chatting to us. Really appreciate this, Sophie.
No problem.
I'm also going to tell you, Sophie, just because I'd like to, in a small way, thank you for this. So I'm going to give you a song request. I'm just going to tell you that now, okay? So at the end of the interview, if you've got a song in mind, I'd just love to play it for you, basically, or a favourite song. My small way of saying thank you, if that's all right.
That's really nice.
I'll just hand over to you to start with, if that's all right. I'd really just like you to, just introduce yourself a little bit for our listeners, if that's okay, and perhaps tell them a little bit about your area of expertise.
Yeah, of course. So, I'm Sophie Harker. I'm an aerodynamics and performance engineer for BAE Systems and the IET's Young Woman Engineer of the Year, as well as an aspiring astronaut, so it's a bit of a mouthful. There's a few different parts of that, but essentially what I do is look at future concept aircraft and work out whether they're going to fly or not, and then if they do fly, how far, how fast, and what can we do to make them fly better is essentially what I do for my main job. But a lot of what I do is about STEM outreach and encouraging young people into science and engineering careers, and particularly looking at the future and what we're going to achieve even technologically in the future.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Sophie. And of course, a particular congratulations to you for that fantastic achievement, being IAT's Young Woman Engineer of the Year winner. That's absolutely fantastic. And I'll just come on to the outreach to start with, because, of course, as you say, that is a big focus of yours. And I can see here that a lot of your passion kind of came from actually a chance meeting with Dr. Helen Sharman. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that.
Yes, very much so. So when I was younger, about 16, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I was good at maths, and that was about as far as it went. And then I went to Kennedy Space Center in the US and decided I wanted to be an astronaut. So it was a little bit late to join that, when you're normally 2 or 3 years old when you want to be an astronaut, but I was 16. As part of that, I entered a competition called Our Space, which no one will have ever heard of. It's just this random one-off competition. And as part of the reward for it, I got to meet Dr. Helen Sharman at the Houses of Parliament, who's the first British person in space, for those who don't know. And she... I had to get over my shell shockness, really.
Yes.
And once I kind of got the courage up, I asked her what I wanted, how to become an astronaut, essentially. And she's the first person that actually said, look at engineering. And then up until that point, I genuinely thought an engineer was someone that fixed your washing machine, because I'd never had any exposure to anything else. So it was really meeting her and having an astronaut say, actually, engineering is inventing and creating and working out the future, essentially. It was really what you're doing. And I decided, that's for me, and just went from there.
Fantastic. And I'm really pleased that you kind of, you're using your position to to hopefully inspire, a new generation of particularly young girls who might be interested in STEM, but perhaps are a little bit put off to start with. I think it's fantastic there are people like yourself there to encourage those people to get involved in STEM, and as you say, work towards the future, basically.
Yeah, it's really important, because I'm very aware that when I was young I had that really lucky opportunity to meet Dr. Sharman, but I'm aware that so many people don't, and I would have gone my whole life not really understanding what engineering was. So I find it really important we get those role models and almost pass on her message that she gave me to as many young people as I can. And the main aim is to get those role models in the public, so that people can go, oh, they're just like me, I could do that. That's it's dispelling those myths and saying that engineering is more than just hard hats and overalls. It's technology and excitement and so many vast fields. It's helping humanity, whether that be through renewable energy or through biomedical engineering. There's just so many different parts of it.
That's fantastic, and I do hope that, especially if any young girls or students happen to tune into this and hear you today, I really hope that they take note of this and listen to what you've got to say for them, basically. And as well, it's a nice time to be talking to you today, in particular, of course. I suppose this year, because it's 50 years on from the lunar landing, isn't it?
It is, yes. It's quite an exciting year, really. There's a lot of events going on, a lot of celebrations to be had.
Actually, recently watched that film. I don't know if you saw it, First Man, and it got me thinking about this again. It's a great film.
Yeah, no, it's a superb film, and it brought the moon landings, I think, to a whole new generation. So First Man really did bring, and films such as Hidden Figures as well as the other ones that bring sort of the American space race back from the 50s and 60s into the younger generations, really.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I wonder, Sophie, if I know we've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I wonder if there's any kind of, I suppose, key messages that you'd like to get out there, especially for any young girls who might be listening. I wonder if you've got any key messages of encouragement and for them to start thinking perhaps about engineering if they haven't already.
Yeah, I think my main piece of advice for anyone that is considering engineering or doesn't really know much about engineering is to find out what you're interested in. It sounds a bit vague, but it's really true, because engineering is so vast. And it's like, for me, moon landings and space, and that was what I loved, and that was what I really was interested in, and that's what led me to it. But like I was saying before, there's so many other varied fields that find out what you enjoy talking about, find out what you enjoy learning about, and then from there, engineering will touch it, I promise you, in any way, somehow, some form.
Yes.
It will touch it, and you can work on something that you truly love.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Sophie. I'd really like, if it's okay with you, just briefly, I won't keep you for too much longer now, just to return just for a minute or so to your kind of current work that you do, the running analyses on the jets. I wonder if you can kind of just for sake of interest, really, for our listeners, I wonder if you could kind of run us through that process a little bit.
So essentially what I do is I'm in a team where we've got lots of different types of engineers. So we've got design engineers, for example, we've got systems engineers or aerodynamics engineers like myself, and we all work on future concepts. So our designers will design future aircraft to do different jobs. So, for example, we'll have hypersonic planes, so things that are flying really fast, so Mach 5, so 5 times the speed of sound, or we'll even have space planes, things that take off from a runway and go all the way into space. And then they'll pass it to us as aerodynamicists, and we will look at working out whether they're going to fly. And then if they do fly, how far, how fast, and what can we do to fly them better. And it's mostly through maths and physics and really pulling the two together and applying it to a real world thing.
That's so cool, Sophie. You know what, it sounds a lot cooler, because I like to claim that I'm a scientist, but I just work on algae. How boring is that? Yours sounds so much cooler.
Very important, very important.
yeah, important, but yeah, a little bit snore-inducing, but anyway. I think you have earned your song request now, you know what, Sophie. I think it's only fair that I now allow you to choose your song. Have you got a song that you'd like me to play you?
I do. It's probably not the cheeriest of songs, though.
That's all right.
So it's actually my favourite song in the world, and many people don't know much about it, but it's a song called Vienna by Billy Joel.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, yeah.
It's my favourite song, and it's all about not giving up on your dream, and that Vienna waits for you just means that time, like it takes time to get there, and don't give up and don't give yourself a hard time. So that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, perfect. What a fitting song as well. I think that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Sophie. And very last question, and I promise, then it is time for you to escape, and I know that's the moment you've been looking forward to. But thanks so much for your time today. It's just really, if there's anywhere we can point our listeners in a bit more, for a bit more information, if you'd like to get across any links, for the IET or anything like this, if you'd like to, you're welcome to.
Yes, definitely. So I really recommend looking at the IET's website as a whole. There's so many different initiatives for young engineers and emerging engineers, and different scholarships and awards to look at, and particularly the IET Young Woman Engineer of the Year Awards. They've just been, on International Women's Day, the applications open, so I really encourage anyone to look at them, because I've had some amazing opportunities over the past few months because of it, and I've had the best time, so I really recommend that people do look at it.
Thank you very much for your time, and congratulations again on that fantastic achievement. Thanks, Sophie.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks again to Sophie Harker for coming on the show. Fantastic to chat to you, Sophie. Really, really enjoyed meeting you as well, so thanks very much for that. Now, coming up next, it's a pretty inspirational lady, I'm afraid. Another one, for you tonight. It is Crista Cullen, MBE. She's an Olympic gold medal winning hockey player. Bit of a backstory to her first, and then I'm going to tell you what she's done recently, because it's super impressive, and I think you're going to be interested in this. So, if you haven't heard of Crista before, well, she made her senior international debut for England in 2003. She was part of the GB squad, which won bronze at the 2012 Summer Olympics in London, as well as the England squad that won bronze at the 2006 Commonwealth Games in Melbourne. Now, she came out of retirement, actually, in 2015 to join the GB team again for the 2016 Rio Olympics, and played an instrumental part in a team that went unbeaten throughout the tournament, eventually winning, that's it, an Olympic gold medal. Awesome stuff. Now, recently, Crista actually trekked Mount Kilimanjaro in a bid to highlight the growing number of female porters worldwide. So these are women who carry water, essentially, for really long distances in very difficult conditions. Now, she's a supporter of the Kilimanjaro Guide Scholarship Foundation, which runs educational courses during the trekking off-season when employment is scarce. So particularly, of course, in Africa, this is appropriate for. Now, this gives the porters the chance to learn English, receive training, and improve their employment opportunities. To date, I believe 800 porters have benefited from the school. Now, so far, they've nearly exclusively been male. This, of course, is because a lot of these societies that they operate in are patriarchal, meaning that it's always been the men who have gone out to earn a living. Now, Collins trekked up Kilimanjaro with a team of female porters, of which actually there were none 10 years ago, so there's a growing area for women to experience why this project is making such a difference to these women, the lives of these women, and to understand what these female porters do, and to experience life as a female porter, because trust me, this sounds pretty hardcore, it's pretty heavy going. She completed this challenge where she had to carry a 20-kilogram bag on her head, as the local porters do every day, of course. Now, this sounds pretty horrendous, okay? As I chat to Crista about, I've recently begun, a bit of weight training. But I can tell you what, I would not like to have a 20-kilo weight on my head, and I especially would not like to then have to trek up Mount Kilimanjaro with that on my head. Sounds incredibly tough, doesn't it? Well, this is what these female porters do on a day-to-day basis, and it's what Crista did recently as well to raise awareness for this. She's made a short film as well that you can check out. That's enough from me, though. I'm going to invite Crista to the show now. We're going to have a chat about this fascinating and very inspirational topic. So listen close. Straight after this, we're going to get some tunes on and invite even more guests to the show for you this evening. Thanks for being with me so far. This is Celebrity Science here on Coast FM. We're going through until 8 o'clock tonight. Woohoo!
My name's Crista Cullen. I am an ex-GB hockey player, lucky enough to be part of an amazing team to win both Olympic bronze in London and gold in Rio. But I went on a little challenge that challenged me in very different ways, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, but not just as a normal pundit or a normal client. I actually did it as authentically as I possibly could, carrying 20 kilos on my head to replicate what the porters do, but more so the female porters, because traditionally they carry water on their heads from a very young age as African women, and being brought up in Africa and as a Swahili speaker and a Kenyan, I engrossed myself in their world and tried to show them in the light that they do, you know, the resilience of what they show every day, carrying 20 kilos on their head and their small backpacks of 5-6 kilos on their back to get up one of the most amazing mountains in Africa.
You know what, just straight off the bat, that sounds like already an absolutely impossible task to most people. I don't think most people probably couldn't even lift 20 kilos above their head, let alone carry it on their head up a mountain. It's crazy. That is so tough.
Yeah, well, the first time I actually put it on my head, I sort of didn't do much training because I wanted to do it as authentically as possible.
Yes.
And being somebody from an elite environment that does tend to sort of carry weight or do weight training,
of course.
I sort of thought, well, what's the difference between putting, something on your back and doing a few squats to actually putting it on your head? But I soon learned there is quite a difference.
Yes.
And carrying it for 8 hours a day, either on the top of your head or on the sort of back of your neck, is quite a tough ask. And sort of 3 weeks later, still with the pain in my neck and shoulders, I think I didn't really prepare as possibly I should have.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've actually just recently started weight training. I think 20 kg for me is an awful lot already. I don't think I'd be able to do even a tenth of that, to be perfectly honest, on my head and walking something like that. I mean, crazy. I'm extremely impressed. It's crazy that this is going on every day, you know, that people don't really realise much about it, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this was never about, gender really, other than it was the lack of opportunity.
Sure.
I'm very proud of coming from a very gender-neutral sport where we sort of split funding and everything between male and female counterparts, and I'm proud of that. But in this environment in itself, there is sort of this misdemeanor really that females are incapable because of the physical demands of carrying the weight to be able to take on the challenge, and they don't get the chance or the opportunity to become porters and therefore lose out on employment. And that was more of this story. This is about the fact that there's only 18% of the porter body being female, and the reasons why they don't get the chances is purely because of the physical capabilities of the job. But they do prove every day, and I feel so proud to have walked alongside them to sort of tell their story, because they really are stalwart and amazing individuals. And
I believe as well you actually helped create a short film about this trek, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the idea of it, was to showcase the women's story in a way that hopefully I could make it really authentic and genuine and real, and that was part and parcel of the not training, but also, just embracing it, throwing myself in. And as a Kenyan myself, I was able to speak to them in Swahili and make it sort of get the real depth of the story, because it has been 10 years for women to sort of get to this point. And initially, sort of one woman in amongst a huge group of men, where there's a lot of sort of derogatory comments thrown at her incapabilities. Yes. And in some ways, being a European in that environment, I got the same treatment. Derogatory comments, ironically, I could understand them, with them being Swahili sort of being thrown at me. Yes. And then sort of going on that journey to complete acceptance by the end, where everybody, all porters were sort of high-fiving me, and they couldn't believe that a European woman had actually managed to do the 8 days. And I sort of went on their journey for 10 years in an 8-day period, which was incredibly inspiring and amazing. And some of the women's stories are just so special. The majority of them are single mums, trying to educate their children as their main motive. And obviously employment and opportunities in Africa are seldom to come by. So, they need these opportunities to be given a chance. And
you were saying, I'd just really like to come back to these porters, but you were saying actually they start at a really young age, you were saying earlier as well. I mean, I can't quite imagine that. I find it so difficult to picture myself being able to do that, especially at a young age. It's completely crazy, completely inspiring. But you were saying, a lot of these young women actually carry heavy weights like this from a young age.
Yeah, I think traditionally African women, unfortunately, unlike us here in the West, have to walk long distances to sort of fetch water,
yes,
and various things just for existence. And I don't think we sort of appreciate, how tough that really is. No. And some of the water they fetch, I mean, that's a different conversation. But, they have to go large distances and carry, matungis is what they're called, but these sort of huge barrels of water on their heads is their way of, is their choice, actually, rather than on their backs. because traditionally that's just always been how they've done it as African women, and so they choose to sort of carry these bags on their heads, and unbelievably, I mean, I needed both arms to sort of support the weight on my head, because my lack of balance was quite obvious, and you'll see on the film that it is quite obvious, but they just pop it on their heads and off they go and walk without even supporting it. It was quite amazing to be in and amongst that kind of environment.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate your time today, and I'd just really like to, and this is a bit daft now, and please excuse me for this question, but I'd just like to, if you'd like a song request on, I'd like to play you a little song. So I don't know if there's anything obvious, any favourite tunes, and I know this is completely different, completely daft, but can I interest you in a song? Because I'd love to just say thank you by playing your favourite song.
Well, it's not necessarily a favourite, but I'm actually off to a Florence and Machine concert on Thursday, so I think it's very apt to play You've Got the Love. Hopefully that'll lift a few people up too.
Oh, yeah, ideal. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. That's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. West Cornwall, Coast FM.
Welcome back. Each time to move on with the show this evening. Got plenty more special guests to fit in for you tonight, ladies and gents. Don't forget as well, I am running a little competition for you to win some goodies for your beloved dogs. Woohoo! If you want to win some goodies, then all you have to do is text me. Let me know some funny stories about your dogs. It really is that simple. I'm going to pick a few at the end of the show, send out some goodies to you. How about that? All to celebrate the release of the film A Dog's Journey in cinemas now. Cool stuff. So the very big thanks to the filmmakers for sending me some goodies to give out to you here on Coast. Okay, next up it is Sarah Willingham. We've been talking about small business start advice. Caught Sarah briefly. Now, just... okay, I do hope you can go easy on me tonight, folks, for this one, because obviously I'm not really a businessman. I don't usually attempt business interviews, but I couldn't resist because Sarah is awesome. Of course, she was a dragon on Dragon's Den. Well known for that, obviously. And also, she's a massive name in the world of business. Runs chains like Pizza Express and a bunch of other things as well in the States and in the UK. Awesome. So I called her and I asked her if she had any obvious business advice for small businesses here in Cornwall. This is what she said. Now, there is an obvious song request coming up for this. I was tempted to build a little playlist of money-related tunes. Kind of giving it away now already, haven't I? Even using the word money, there is a particular song, an obvious song, and it's going to be played. Forgive me, I'm not very creative. Anyway, Sarah Willingham, ladies and gents, enjoy this. You okay? Can you hear me okay?
Hey Ben, we're great, how are you?
Very well, thanks. So it's a very warm welcome back to you, Sarah, actually. I don't know if you remember, we had you back in, I think it was 2017, talking about cash flow, so welcome back.
Oh, obviously it's my subject of choice.
Yes, of course.
And since then, we have actually spent the morning Googling the Isle of Scilly.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we know all about it.
Oh, it's a beautiful place. Have you ever visited?
Yeah, we are well researched in the Isle of Scilly.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. You should definitely visit.
We got really geeky about it, actually. We started properly with like pictures. We wanted to know how far it was, how do you get there, how many islands are there, how many are inhabited.
Oh, there's a lot to learn, isn't it? It's just such a small place, but it's so interesting. There's a lot of actually Iron Age forts there as well, because one of my friends actually is doing a PhD in Iron Age remains. Yeah, pretty cool place actually.
Very cool. Yeah, it's on the list now. We must go.
Nice. Well, let us know when you do, and then we can come and hound you in, because obviously you'll actually probably have to come past Coast FM in Penzance to get there, so we'll be able to kind of watch out the window and spy on you going across.
Oh, brilliant.
Awesome. If it's all right with you, and I know you did last time, Sarah, but I'd love if you could, well, basically just introduce yourself for our listeners today, and I'll fire some questions your way after that.
Great. Hello, I'm Sarah Willingham, entrepreneur and investor, and ex-dragon from Dragon's Den.
Let's talk a little bit, because I know this is something you've been thinking about recently, but talking a little bit about the difficulties that small businesses are facing, particularly when they're starting up. I wonder if we could just kind of basically fire away with this, and why is it so tough to start out when you think about small businesses?
The regulation when starting up is really off-putting. So 88% of small business owners feel very overwhelmed by this regulation. And you've got 85% of people who have had less than 24 hours worth of financial experience or business education at the time of starting a business. That's quite a big
number
Yes.
in 85% of people. So it's no wonder that 50,000 small businesses are failing each year due to cash flow issues. And it's one of the things that I talk to, whether it be one of my investments from Dragon's Den or a business that I'm just working with and helping, talk to them right at the beginning in the early days. It's about setting yourself up as if you're going to be a much bigger business. So set yourself up today as you kind of would have to in a year's time. And what I mean by that is making sure I'm a real numbers person, and you cannot be a successful business without understanding your numbers. You need to know where your profit's coming from, you need to know where your sales is coming from, you need to know where your costs are going out, and you need to be able to plan when you're going to have big lumps of cash going out. So it is about understanding how your business works. So setting up in the beginning that you start to record absolutely everything so that you can actually make some pretty detailed decisions about your business.
Yeah, you know what? When I first saw that figure, a lot of people starting out, with not very much in the way of training at all, I was kind of surprised. But then actually, I got thinking, and when you kind of see things on Instagram, I don't know if this plays into it at all, but you're kind of always coming across, kind of micro businesses almost on things like Instagram and things, and you kind of wonder, how many of those are going to take off.
Yeah, I mean, of course, hundreds of thousands of businesses are started every year, and there's only room for so many of them to be, in inverted commas, successful, as in they get much bigger and start to employ people. But actually, a lot of people start small businesses because it's a lifestyle decision. So they're not looking to employ loads of people. They're not looking to make loads of money. Actually, what they want to do is to have a bit more freedom of their time, not work for somebody else so that they call the shots. But in fact, in the end, they can end up working the same amount of hours and earning a similar amount of money, and they're very, very happy with that. And that is definitely the majority of small businesses that is started every year in the UK. They're like the landscape gardeners, plumbers, people who are selling cupcakes out of their kitchen. They are much smaller businesses. But actually, what's really interesting is even for the smaller businesses, once you get over 85,000 turnover, for example, sales, you've got to start paying VAT. Now, one of the things that we're talking about today is that in April, over 1 million businesses, probably don't realise it yet, have actually got to start filing their tax returns digitally through a software company that's been approved by HMRC. Now, if you don't know that that's coming up, so if you haven't planned for this and you don't know that that's coming up, then suddenly that opens up this whole world of things that you have to do that you didn't know existed, and that can seem very, very overwhelming. So it is about making sure that you've got good advice, that you keep in touch with your bookkeeper or your accountant so that you know where all of your cash is going and coming from.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually started a small medical writing business, and I absolutely loved. He came up with a bunch of little merchandise, little figures and pencils. They were awesome. But anyway, that's a separate story. And I wonder as well if this might be a bit of a daft question, but I wonder if we could kind of take things just for a little while, take things back to the start, and because I know you mentioned this at the beginning, Sarah, about people starting out new businesses with not a lot in the way of, not necessarily a lot in the way of any training or any formal training. I wonder if there's any kind of obvious places for people to start in terms of making sure that they are aware that they're following, all the correct rules and things, and basically making sure that they are doing the right thing. I wonder if there's any obvious sources that people can go to for that.
Well, in terms of tax, for example, there is the obvious hmrc.gov, so the government website, which pretty much tells you all of the bureaucracy and the red tape that you have to adhere to in order to be, a legal entity, so you're not going to get any fines, and that's really important. One of the things I think is really seems to be undervalued is actually just asking for help. Yes. So it's about understanding where it is that you feel that you are lacking in experience, and you'd be surprised how often you knock on a door and it actually opens and people want to help you. And I think if numbers is really, really not your thing, then find a local bookkeeper that can help you out. You'd be surprised at just how much money you'll end up saving by having a good set of numbers, and also how it will help you to grow by understanding which areas of your business are the most profitable.
No, that's fantastic. Well, thank you, and hopefully this does go out and go out to a lot of people who might already be in this exact position. Worrying perhaps a little bit about how to effectively keep going and how to ensure that they're not going to fall foul of these rules and basically just how to become perhaps a bit more efficient too. So I think it's really useful to have you on the show with us today. So thanks for that. And I'd really like just to head towards closing up now. I won't keep you for too much longer, but two things really. First of all, if there is anything at all that you would like to, either reiterate or add at this stage for our listeners, then you are very welcome to do so. I'd love to give you a song request as well. How do you feel about that?
Wow, song request. Okay, I've got to think about one now. But yeah, I think the best piece of advice I can give, in terms of starting your business, is firstly, if you are that person that really wants to start a business and you've got something that you think is going to work, then don't let your legacy be the person who just came up with the great idea. But at the same time, don't risk the roof over your head. Give it a go, but make sure that you structure it in such a way that actually you've got really good people around you. And from day one, understand your numbers. And now I sound like I'm sat on Dragon's Den now, but really, your numbers are so important.
I'll just finish up with the song request then, in that case, if that's all good. So, if I can interest you, obviously you don't have to have a song. I know this is a bit silly, isn't it? But if there is an obvious one, I'll play it. I mean, it could be, for example, Money, 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 ABBA.
That's a good one, isn't it?
We should just come up with a little playlist here. Maybe I'll play a couple. Is that all right?
Sarah playlist, who'd have thought it?
I know, it's coming on, isn't it? I mean, this might end up being a new business, Sarah. You never know. Well, thank you very much, dear. I will let you go then.
Thank you so much, Ben. You've been fantastic.
Welcome back to the studio. It's me, Ben, here still for you. We're going through until 8 o'clock this evening, so I've got plenty more special guests and tunes for you as well. So don't you worry, and don't you go anywhere. I'm here with you. Right, okay. The next guest I would like to invite to the show now is our scientist star of the week, which this week is Professor Dave Hoskin. Should come as no surprise to those of you who have been following this show because, of course, Dave is one of our regular scientists. Next week, we've got a totally different scientist of the week, though, so do tune in next week as well to find out who we have. Now, this week, I put the question to Dave, what is ageing? He's done some work on ageing in various organisms. Turns out that ageing doesn't always occur. Sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? There's even a process called anti-aging. Weird? Well, we will find out a bit more about that very, very shortly indeed. Before I invite Dave to the show, though, because, of course, Avengers Endgame is in cinemas at the moment. No spoilers, by the way. Just going to put that out there because I know it can be stressful. I know that can be very stressful indeed. But because it's out in cinemas, is it a good time to remind you that I chatted to Alexandra Burke, pop star Alexandra, about Thanos being a great inspiration for workouts? Because this happened quite recently, actually. Now, this clip is all about Infinity War, so don't worry, there's no spoilers for Endgame. I'm not ridiculous. I'm not going to drop some sweet spoilers on you. Anyway, let's just remind you about that, because I quite like it. Right, okay, well, I don't know if you're a fan of the Marvel films at all, the Avengers.
I am a massive fan of Marvel.
I'm so pleased to hear that.
Like, you don't even test me with that, because I love them. Oh my God.
Well, you know what, the most motivating moment is when Thanos arrives, because, come on, Thanos is the biggest workout inspiration I've ever seen.
But baby, he's naughty.
I know, he's not great.
Nobody cares about him.
No.
No, we care because he's killing everyone, but we don't. No, I can't take that one. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Captain America then, when he rocks up first, that's really cool.
Captain America rocks up anytime. It's inspirational.
Yeah.
And Thor.
You know what? Thor is he's a dangerously handsome man as well. Chris Hemsworth. He's annoyingly attractive, I think.
Yeah, so. I couldn't really comment on that because I'm engaged, so I've got to be really careful.
Yeah, it's all right. We'll have to edit that bit out anyway. If you do comment, it's fine. Yeah, just thought I'd remind you about that. Anyway, right, okay, let's invite Dave. Well, this always happens, all right? I've gone on a bit of a tangent for you, haven't I? I'm so sorry, folks. Let's get back to the show. Right, Dave, first up is the question. What is ageing? Here's what Professor Hoskin had to say about that.
And it's a really good question, and I know a little bit about it. I'm not an expert. I mean, I have published on ageing. Basically, ageing is a function of selection. we age because either selection is weak at an older age, or because selection has favoured reproduction at a younger age, and that trades off with performance at an older age. That's all very sort of technical, and it might sound a bit highbrow. And I realised over the Christmas break, I was explaining to my father-in-law some stuff to do with ageing and how much we sciencey people take for granted really simple concepts like selection. So when I say, there's selection for stuff at a younger age and this trades off at stuff at an older age. So selection means differential reproduction with respect to phenotype technically. What that means is, and I'll use a hypothetical example because I think that kind of helps, right? If you imagine tall people I'm going to pick short people because I'm a bit short. If you imagine short, stubby, chunky people like myself.
Very handsome people like that.
You're a good man, very kind. Produce more children than taller people, then there is selection for shortness. Basically, the genes for shortness increase in frequency because shortness means more offspring, right? So that's why it has to be differential reproduction with respect to some phenotype. So it has to be some element of how the animal looks means that it performs better. So if we think now back to aging, oftentimes animals that reproduce faster will have a selective advantage. So you can imagine in that world that spending as much of your capital on reproducing at a young age means then at an old age you've got less stuff left. And that less stuff left means you can't look after yourself as well, and so that's aging. So there's a trade-off between reproduction at a young age and reproduction at an old age. So that's an example of a trade-off based explanation for aging. But you could also imagine a scenario that the older you get, the more of your fitness, the more of your reproductive potential is in the past, and that means selection must be weaker as you get older. If selection's weaker as you get older, mutations, deleterious mutations that are bad for you, accumulate if they act at old age because selection's weaker. That means to remove those mutations at an old age is much, much harder. So you can imagine a mutation that occurs at a relatively young age would affect lots of people, and that mutation would be lost from the population because anyone that didn't have it would do much better, right? So the genes for not being bad would increase in frequency. At an old age, because most of the stuff's happened before, the ability for selection to remove those bad things massively weakens, and so we see an accumulation. And when I explain it to students, I try and imagine a water tank, and in that water tank you've got some level of water. The out tap, if you like, is selection. The in tap is mutation, and where the water level is determined by how much stuff flows in and by how much stuff flows out. And if we've got lots of mutations building up, so the flow of water into the tank is greater, then the water level rises. So think about this old age thing. Mutational input is greater. Mutations are typically bad. So the water level of bad stuff in the tank increases because selection, the tap out, is not on as much as it would be at an early age. And that's kind of the shtick. I think what's really interesting is, the idea that aging kind of occurs at all is interesting, right? Because we can build a whole organism from a single cell. A sperm meets an egg, they combine to fuse to form a zygote, and from that single cell that they fuse to form, you build a whole animal. So in principle, we should be able to fix everything because we can build from scratch, right?
Sure, yeah.
And some things live thousands of years. So, some trees are thousands of years old. So why do things age? And it goes back to that sort of selective argument. What's really interesting is that some organisms don't age. So we used to think that this aging was a universal phenomenon. And if you define aging as a general decline in performance with age, or decreased survival probability with age, or decreased reproductive output with age, we used to think that was a universal phenomenon. But it now looks like there might be some organisms that actually don't age, or that show anti-aging. So they actually get better as they get older, which is kind of a trippy thing to think about. Anti-aging, but it only sounds a bit weird if you don't think about it in terms of the definition of aging, which is this reduced performance. So anything that has increased performance over time, we would say, is experiencing anti-aging. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting is that people think about aging as a disease, and it's clearly not a disease. It's just a general breakdown of physiological performance because of these weakening of selection, or because of this trade-off that we typically see.
So there you are, a definition of aging from an evolutionary biologist, a top evolutionary biologist from the University of Exeter's Cornwall campus. So thank you very much for that, Dave. Now, if there's one term that I'd like you to take away, well, I suppose two. Obviously, number one being selection. Dave's very keen for you to understand a bit more about selection. It really helps to understand some of these evolutionary principles. So selection's a really, really good thing to do a bit of reading about if you're interested, if you want to kind of learn a bit more about this. But also, come on, this is a cool term, anti-aging. How awesome. How awesome is that term? Sounds pretty sci-fi, doesn't it? Tell you what, shall we give you an example of it so you can really impress your friends next time you're down the pub? All right, here you go.
To give you an example of what I mean by anti-aging, if you have no fixed growth, so you keep growing, so, humans, we grow to a certain size, that's it, we stop growing. Some organisms don't do that, so some fish keep getting bigger as they get older, for example. If you're a female and the number of eggs you lay is a function of your size, then actually you can imagine a situation where most of your reproduction is always in front of you, because if you keep getting bigger, you keep laying eggs, right? So that's a situation where you might see anti-aging, for example, because there's always a big chunk of reproduction in front of you, and sort of like a growing chunk,
right?
Because you keep getting bigger.
We're going to return to Dave straight after this short break. We're going to touch on now what's interesting to Dave now in the area of anti-aging research. This is definitely something to check out, so don't go anywhere. Okay, as promised, let's return to the topic, aging, with Professor Dave Hoskin.
I think what's interesting now in terms of aging research is really trying to understand all the different patterns of aging that we see. We thought we had a really good understanding of it. I think it was G.C. Williams that argued that wherever we went in the universe, we would find aging, but it now appears even on our own planet that's not universally true. So he argued that aging was a universal pattern for replicating organisms, but trying to understand precisely why that is not the case is kind of where we're at now. And whilst we understand it in sort of some sort of very general terms, in the terms that I've kind of couched in these selective terms, the exact detail of what's going on, is still kind of undefined. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way that's pretty much, evolutionary biology, Darwinian biology to a T. We understand the broadest principles. We have our grand unifying theory, and that's evolution through natural selection or through selection, as long as we have certain conditions. Those are that you replicate with some fidelity and some error. So like makes like with some error, and there's competition for resources. Then we have Darwinian evolution. So we understand these really broad principles of what we have, and it's trying to fill in this detail that sits underneath. And it's almost like physics backwards. So physics has got lots of the detail completely covered, but they don't have a grand unifying theory, and we're sort of coming at it from the other way around. We have this grand unifying theory that's withstood everything that's been thrown at it, the direct experimental tests, the tests of logic, the tests of theoretical modelling, and the tests of let's go and look at what's happening in the real world. And it's really much more about detail now. And the reason that I think we've got it the other way around to some extent is that an animal is not an animal in the same way that an electron's an electron. So the detail becomes really super important.
Sure. I think it's a fascinating way to think of it like that, actually, because we had a kind of whole section kind of dedicated to this kind of thought. So if any listeners are tuning into this and they kind of really like the sound of that, they can listen back to one of those. Thanks, Dave. Thanks so far for your time today.
No worries.
It's a fascinating insight into ageing.
Well, we had a paper come out just recently where we found, we thought about ageing in another way. So there's this human health survival paradox where men survive less well than women. So at every age, every time step, they have a higher probability of dying. But at older age, men tend to live more healthy lives than females. So they're more likely to die, but they're more healthy. So health and aging are completely uncoupled.
Sure, right.
At old age. And we thought about that in terms of this thing called intralocus sexual conflict, which is basically the genes that build a good male build a bad female and vice versa. And because human females go through menopause, selection after menopause doesn't exist. There's no selection operating through females anymore. And so these male benefit alleles accumulate in a population, and if females are expressing them at postmenopausal ages, they will be less healthy, even though males live less long. The logic behind that is incontrovertible. It's spot on. We have a mathematical model in the paper to show that it's all perfect. What was super interesting was somebody commented about it online and completely misunderstood the point of the paper. A particular person said, of course men are more healthy because women do all the work. You're mixing up proximate and ultimate answers to a question here. We're talking about ultimate. These are evolutionary answers, and they're not to do with how much work someone does in their backyard and how much it affects them personally. They're evolutionary questions, and you'll see the same pattern in anything that undergoes menopause. You'll see exactly the same pattern by our logic. So it's got nothing to do with being human in some sense. It's got nothing to do with being a primate. It's got everything to do with the fact that selection stops in females as soon as they have menopause. And if males and females are designed, and I say that in inverted commas, not to get confused with some grand designer, if males and females are designed by selection in some sense to do slightly different jobs, and females undergo menopause, then you'll see the same pattern.
West Cornwall's Coast FM.
Just one more section with Dave, and then we will move on to our next special guest. And you'd be pleased to know it's a silly question. I'm afraid I've received another silly question.
Oh, no.
Would you like to do it, or are you?
We'll give it a whirl.
scared?
Come on, we'll give it a whirl.
Are you sure?
Yep, we'll see where we go.
All right. It's quite a simple one, actually,
Yep.
and I quite like the listeners who sent this in. I think they deserve a big round of applause because it really is daft. But very simply, Dave, in your scientific opinion, what would win in a fight? Would it be a T-Rex or a swarm of bats?
That is a very, very tricky question.
It is, isn't it? Tempted to say the T-Rex, but
in a fight. A fight. Well, the bats would be fighting at night. The T-Rex would be relatively cold. I have no flipping on. What sort of bats are they?
Should we say the vampire bats or something like that? Just sounds a bit.
Well, actually, you know what? I'll give you the answer to that question.
Yeah.
The bats have won because T-Rex is extinct. The bats are still here. So my money's on the bats.
Yeah, they're just finding a bunch of fossils, right, aren't they?
Yeah, it's easy. Absolutely easy peasy.
There we go. So if you want a question to put to Dave, be it scientific, like what is aging, or be it daft, then you just get the questions to me. Get them to me on my Facebook page or on the coastline, 07441 900 600. Standard message rates will apply there, but totally worth it, man, because you'll be able to put a question to the profs. Dave and Sasha will return next week, you'll be pleased to know. Now I'm going to take a short musical break, and then we're going to invite our final guest for this evening's episode of Celebrity Science here on Coast FM. Now, guys, I've heard it's apparently actually illegal to run a radio show without playing Toto, so I better get it on. Disclaimer, that's not true at all. But anyway, here's the song. Okay, it's time to invite our final guest for you this evening, Benjamin Mee. He, of course, is the real man that the Hollywood movie We Bought a Zoo, starring Matt Damon and Scarlett Johansson, was made about. So this is pretty cool. So I spoke to basically the real and, of course, much more attractive Benjamin Mee. The real Benjamin Mee. Let's get him on. He's going to tell us a little bit about the story behind the zoo and, of course, this story that inspired this Hollywood film. Here he is, Benjamin Mee, ladies and gents. Well, Ben, absolutely fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed for agreeing to do this. And the great thing is it's the real Ben as well.
Yes, the real Benjamin Mee, not that fake Matt Damon version.
I know, the imposter. I was really keen, really, I mean, if it's okay with you, just to, I know you've just done this talk, which is fantastic. Heard some great student feedback on the way out, by the way. Loads of people saying, that was fantastic.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
It's quite different to, I think, what usually people get, so I think you've done well.
Wherever I go, the talk is different from what people are used to, because it is quite a unique little story that more or less tells itself, but it's very nice to come here to this campus and see the reaction that the students give.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, it's very good of you to come to the campus, and really I was just hoping for our listeners on Coast FM, if you would mind really just taking another trip down memory lane. I know it's only a few minutes after you've already done this, but just to explain the story, I suppose.
It's available in the book that I wrote, We Bought a Zoo, which you can buy online at the zoo. No, just kidding. It's in 2005. My family was made aware that Dartmoor Wildlife Park, as it then was up for sale and going to close. And we didn't think there'd be anything we could do about it, but we decided to look into it just in case there was, because our family is very animal mad, really. We've always grown up and not lost touch of that fact. People often, as you get older, you sort of lose interest in, animals and things. You get sort of proper jobs in the real world. But I was writing a book about animal intelligence already as a science journalist. And as a family, we felt we might be able to breathe life back into this project. And we came and had a look and saw all the massive amount of problems that are involved in reopening a closed zoo that had lost its license. And we felt we needed to try and make a stab at it, because if it had stayed closed and the animals had been destroyed, it would have meant that the site would have been converted into a nursing home, and we just felt that would be like a little light going out in the region, and just if there was anything we could do to make that not happen. And here we are 12 years later, and we amazingly succeeded, although the zoo's nearly closed, so many times because of the recessions and even the bad weather and license issues when the electricity supply was condemned. In our first few weeks of arriving, they presented us with a bill for £110,000 to get that up to an acceptable level, which wasn't in the plan. But then we had the incredible good fortune of Hollywood bought the rights to my book, We Bought a Zoo, and turned it into a film, which kind of shone a bit of favourable publicity on us. And it hasn't been plain sailing since then. We've spent a lot of time developing the research and education side. You can now do a course in zoo management at the zoo, underpinned by Dutchy College, but we deliver it on site with some of our staff. And we've joined all the breeding programs for the big cats, because the previous owner, he bred a lot of animals, but none of them were on stud books, and it meant there was no real future for those animals anywhere. But all of our animals are part of established breeding programs, some of which we hope will be reintroduced into the wild eventually. So it's a very good, thriving, ongoing project that I'm proud to be associated with now.
It's absolutely fantastic. I think the great thing about it is that your focus on your commitment to research and science and education is fantastic. So if people have seen the film, perhaps they might want to delve into the book, or they might have already read the book as well, then I just think it's great that you're still, it's still out there, it's still going on, and you're still making all this fantastic progress.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, no, I mean, there's always good. We have to have a focus of where we're going to be in the future, and ideally an orangutan rehabilitation centre at the zoo. Teach them sign language as well, so that they can teach their offspring sign language, and we can watch a different language evolving in a different species. That would be my long-term ambition for the site.
And do you have any particular kind of research projects ongoing at the moment that you're allowed to talk about a little bit?
Yeah, well, the thing I was doing before we got the zoo was actually looking at whether social mammals have a sense of humour, and I've obviously got slightly distracted by buying a zoo, which sort of set me back a bit, but now I'm back in touch with the academics I was working with before. The field's moved on a little bit, but still nobody's looking directly at humour in social mammals, and I'm hoping to go this year over to Japan, where there is a chimpanzee there are several chimpanzees in a research facility who've been trained to tolerate EEG headsets.
Right.
So you can take an electroencephalogram measure their brain patterns, and if they are shown cartoons and experience humour in the same way that humans do, that will be a world first, leaping that understanding forwards of what those animals are capable of, and it should have a really positive impact on rights for those animals, because if they have an appreciation of humour,
yes,
they have a theory of mind, which means that they're sentient individuals, scientifically proven. And so far, it's easy. You can always come back and say, well, you can't really tell what they're thinking. We can't really say that they're definitely suffering or they're definitely aware of this stuff. If you can show they've got a theory of mind, you can tell they definitely are experiencing those things. And that's been my long-term plan all along. And we're getting quite close to that now.
That's fantastic. You know what, it kind of sounds like, I suppose always historically in science we've kind of held this quite arrogant view traditionally, haven't we, that we as humans are so separate from the rest of the
animals. It goes back such a long way, and it's really hard to pinpoint. I mean, René Descartes had this dualism of mind and body, and he felt that animals were definitely just chattels with nothing going on. And some people blame the Bible for having, man has dominion over all the animals. It goes back, it's just natural, really, in that we are a very, very dominant species, and any dominant species makes the most of its position. Tigers will be extremely hostile to any other animal that they're capable of dominating, and we're capable of dominating absolutely anything. But we're also capable of reasoning about our own behaviour, and if enough evidence is presented, then we can, as a species, we can adapt our ways. And I think that's one of the amazing things about this era we live in now with the internet. And you can suddenly get the whole of global opinion brought to bear on one topic and change it. And it's like the attitude to plastic is amazing.
Yes.
It was one sort of really cool documentary, but then that was sort of pushed by social media, and now plastic's a dirty word, and everybody is looking at new ways to get plastic out of the waste stream and out of the oceans, and there are all kinds of positive technologies evolving to do that. And I think the way we look at animals as a species is another thing that's coming up really fast, and like the rise in veganism is really encouraging. I've been experimenting with veganism for a couple of years, and I still eat fish, and but I think the idea that plant-based diets for the world is actually more sustainable, fewer carbon emissions, and better use of the land. Cows are phenomenally bad for the environment, and people are beginning to understand that, and it gives us an appreciation that factory farming is actually where animal rights and the environment kind of meet, and these are things that we should be addressing, and it's exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially pleased that you've mentioned that, because of course based on the most recent IPCC report, it's actually extremely disturbing, actually, isn't it? This is the time to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea we've got a limited amount of time before global warming becomes irreversible, but also when it does, it's going to rise sea levels, which will reduce arable land, which is being dominated by cattle farming. If you actually want to feed people and stop global warming, switch to plants and insects. Insects as a protein source, 7 times the yield per acre compared to cattle, and no CO2. If we all ate bug burgers instead of beef burgers, we could feed everybody, and the sea level would stay the same. But people go, oh well, no, I kind of want my food to come from those black and white things on the hillside that I drive past in the car, and I don't want to see the eyes. And it's like, well, if you want to have a future for this species on this planet, then really we've got to start making some shifts. But I think the internet and the way young people are so well informed about these issues now is really, really encouraging for promoting rapid change. One or two heads of state in the way at the moment, mentioning no names, but it can't last forever. It can't last forever. And I like the way the rest of the world just carries on. So, well, we're going to stick to the treaties and we're going to kind of push this thing through. So no, it's very exciting times to be part of.
That's fantastic. No, as you say, I think the key message is that it's encouraging. I don't think people should be too depressed about it. We can do something about this.
Yeah, that's what I like. I remember an environmentalist. I was at a lecture a little while ago. It was someone who had worked with Al Gore on his stuff, and he said as soon as he started talking about global warming, he noticed that everyone in the room switched off.
Yes.
And he said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, there's nothing we can do about it." And it's that attitude you've got to challenge. You've got to say, well, actually you can. And it's one of the things, like at Dartmoor, breeding endangered amur leopards to put them back into the wild in the ecosystem of North Korea and Siberia and Russia. That shows people you can make positive environmental changes through small changes in your behaviour. And that's the message. If everybody does that, then you really can effect change and keep everybody motivated to participate.
And actually, coming on to the some of the animals at the zoo, if you don't mind, I notice you have a lot of reptiles as well. I've personally got a crested gecko. Actually, they're fantastic. They really are cool little things. I don't know whether this is a bit of a daft question, but I don't know whether you've got any kind of personal animals that you'd really like to, talk about a little bit. In terms of any animals that you think require really people's attention more so than others, perhaps any particularly endangered animals that you'd like to mention at this point.
Pangolins are a big trafficked animal at the moment that I know Newquay Zoo has done a lot of work with, trying to reintroduce colonies through working with Southeast Asian countries. But the scale of the problem is just so big, and it's not something. That's not something that we're not end users for those animals, and it's hard to participate in them. But going back to the zoo, we've started breeding electric blue geckos, which are critically endangered. They only exist in one small area of Tanzania where they're seriously threatened by mining, and we brought them to Dartmoor Zoo and started to breed them. And unfortunately, they just opened Europe's largest tungsten mine about half a kilometre away from the zoo.
Right.
And the vibrations that passed through from the mine every now and again I was really worried that this was, this gecko that we rescued from this exact environment. We were replicating the very circumstances that left it in danger. But it has bred really well. And so we've now, although they're not as impressive as the big cats, in terms of supporting the IUCN
Fantastic,
Red List,
yes.
we have actually started breeding some critically endangered critters, and it is all in the reptile department. There are a couple of other critically endangered amphibians that we've been successful with, and that's the thing about modern zoos is people come to see the lions and the tigers and the meerkats, but actually, the reptiles and the other animals are kind of niche, like the bird people are quite niche. But actually, often that's where a lot of the critically endangered breeding goes on, and it's the big popular animals that kind of get the footfall through that pays for those conservation programs. So if you want to support conservation, you come to the zoo just to see the lions and the tigers, which were hugely impressive at Dartmoor. Then you're actually contributing to the work of the charity as a whole in doing a lot wider conservation work.
Absolutely fantastic. So I do urge anyone who visits Dartmoor Zoo to not forget about the reptiles and the birds and go and have a look
at them all. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, thanks very much. I won't keep you for too much longer, Ben. I know you've been talking already for ages now, so I won't keep you for too much longer. I wonder if we could... Well, actually, two things, because I'd really like to give you a song request, and I know this is a bit harsh. It's right on the spot, right?
Wow.
And secondly, I'd love if you could just kind of... I suppose point our listeners in the direction of a bit more information. I mean, the obvious place might be the Dartmoor Zoo website.
Dartmoor Zoo website, and you just Google it and see. I mean, there are all sorts of different ways to get involved. Obviously, my trustees, we're now a charity. They would say press the donate button, which is a great thing to do. But more for people in this locality, come and volunteer. And I'm really proud of our volunteering program. We've got like 100 to 150 volunteers on our books at any time. And you find people, we actually take referrals from GPs for people with mild depression, because it's been shown that volunteering at the zoo is actually really good for your mental health. You meet people, you develop new skills, you become more confident. So there are lots of different ways to get involved. But do check out the website, and come and see us. Come and see us, because that's what we rely on, visitors, and we can't carry on unless we have lots of visitors through the door.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Ben. And also, I wonder if I could be a bit naughty and return to a question that I overheard you having with one of the students just now, because quite a funny story actually. The story about the Scarlett Johansson casting caused a bit of disruption, should we say?
Yeah, you mean that when they were discussing casting and they cast Scarlett?
Yes.
And that's supposed to be really good news, and it was really good news for the film, and everyone's going, oh, Scarlett Johansson. I was really concerned that they were going to cast her as my wife, and my wife was lovely, but she wasn't like Scarlett Johansson, who's a completely different kind of character. And I'd already had a long conversation with a producer who'd asked me quite specifically to choose different actors and actresses for various roles, and said what was Catherine like. And any of the older listeners out there well know there's an actress called Mary Steenburgen. I'll tell you what she was in. She was in the thing with Steve Martin about families, Parenthood, I think.
Right.
I think she was a wife in that. And that was like Catherine. And I said this to the producer, and then the next thing I hear is, we've cast Scarlett Johansson in the movie. I'm like, great part, But actually, obviously for the film, it's an amazing coup, and she played luckily she played a completely different role of the zookeeper, who was actually based on a character who in real life was called Robert. And that was the thing that when I met Robert in the street a little while later, and I said, what's it like being played by Scarlett? And he looked at me, and I thought, actually, he's a big bloke, this guy. And sorry, Robert. But it was an interesting story.
Could have been so much worse though for Robert, couldn't it? I think he's done okay.
I think he's done okay. Yeah, I think once he learns to live with that, I think being played by Scarlett Johansson, whatever gender you are, just get over it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ben, thanks so much. And I wonder if you do have a song, an obvious song that I can, just a very small way of saying thank you. Really, I mean, it can be anything.
Well, I'll tell you what we've been listening to in the car on the way to school recently with my daughter, who's 16 but has a really good taste in music. Ride a White Swan, which always puts you in a good mood. But for those animal lovers out there, I would not recommend actually doing that.
Just a word of caution there at the end. Thank you very much indeed, Ben. I'll let you go now. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
Coast FM.
That's it. It's come to the end of another show, another episode of Celebrity Science here on Coast FM for you this evening with me, Ben Makin. You'll be pleased to know it's nearly time for me to retire from the radio for the evening. I am back next Wednesday evening here on Coast FM for another show. Thank you very much to all of my very special guests tonight. Thanks to Chris Packham, naturalist and TV presenter. Thanks to Sophie Harker. She's from the Institute of Engineering and Technology. She's the Young Woman Engineer of the Year award winner, looking at future concept aircraft. I must apologise to any viewers who happened to catch my live Facebook feed earlier of me playing around with paper airplanes earlier. I was quite excited about Sophie coming on the show, so I had to kind of test some aircraft myself briefly in the studio. Thanks to Crista Cullen, MBE, Olympic gold medal winning hockey player. Absolutely fantastic to have a legend such as yourself on the show, Crista. Thanks for that. Another legend here from the world of business. Thanks to Sarah Willingham, businesswoman, of course. You'll know her actually as the manager of the chain Pizza Express and a bunch of other successful chains too. And of course, as a dragon on Dragon's Den. Thanks very much, Sarah. Thanks to Benjamin Mee, who we heard from just now. The real man, the real Ben, behind the Hollywood film We Bought a Zoo, which stars Matt Damon as the fake Ben on screen. The fake Ben. Not good enough, is it? We got the real Ben. We didn't want the fake Ben. We got the real one. Cool stuff. So thanks very much to all of my guests. Thanks to Dave Hoskin as well. Prof. Hoskin, one of our show regulars today. He was answering a listener question, what is ageing? Next week, he'll be back answering your questions. If you want to put a question to the profs, you can always do that. Just get the text to me with your questions in 07441 900 600. Standard message rates do apply there, but it's totes worth it, as I'm sure you believe. And thank you. Biggest thank you of all is to you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining me. Catch me again next Wednesday if you like. Now I'm going to finish up now with Ben's song request, Ride a White Swan. Maybe I've got time to fit in some Rod Stewart. I don't know. We'll have to see, won't we, before the show finishes. We'll just have to test. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye-bye. Bye. Goodbye. Bye.